It had been a couple of months since Braunton had gone to the works to be rebuilt. Although the other engines missed his quick wit and terrible analogies, they had been working extremely hard to keep a full timetable in operation. Stan, who had been acting weirdly since Christmas, was managing to keep to the bullied times that he'd set on the Stovell flyer, because a lot of other traffic was having to be sidelined, or in the case of goods traffic, made into longer trains. Arthur was the only engine that could manage the length of these trains, but he was mostly caught up with the engineering services on the extension to the railway. This was taking up more time as the end date for the construction work had already been set and was fast approaching. This left the mixed traffic engines Vaughan and Earl with a huge predicament. Lord Stovell had once too often been on the receiving end of one of their long-winded and sometimes rather rude outbursts. He'd since been in talks with the Western region of British Railways inquiring into the purchase or loan of an express passenger locomotive. The Western region had foolishly tried to suggest Hinderton Hall, to which Vaughan and Stan had replied to even before Lord Stovell with an angry letter. However, in a recent turn of events, Lord Stovell had managed to chivvy up one of his close friends who happened to be on the Western region administration, and had finally got an engine that he was sure would do the job rather nicely. Lord Stovell could be seen one bright morning almost skipping down the road to the engine sheds at Stowborough. "Good morning, engines. I've got some good news. I've finally managed to secure an engine of some stature and one you'll actually approve of." "Oh, thank goodness for that. I really don't know what they were thinking trying to send that bloody supremacist back here. It's probably annoying them so much they want rid of him." "And that wouldn't surprise me at all." "Yes, well, as I was saying, I think you'll all approve of this engine." "Is it another 460? That would be interesting, actually." "Well, that rules out the possibility of anything southern. All our modern, decent express passenger designs are Pacifics." "Not really. The Lord Nelsons are pretty good 460s. "Well, I guess you're right, but I'm kind of biased though, aren't I?" "Can I please get a word in? Honestly, it's not like I own the railway or anything." "Oh, yes, sir. Sorry, sir." "Sorry, sir." Right, as I was saying, as you all know, the Western region have been working closely with us recently, as I've allowed them access to the railway whilst we have our extension built. This has helped keep the money situation in the green. The other day I was able to travel on one of the BR trains as it took workmen from further afield back home, and I was rather impressed by the performance of the loco pulling me. I've managed to secure one of his class for us here, which means that we'll be able to stop allowing BR on our metals, and we can finally run our trains again without worry. Not to be rude, sir, but can you just tell us already? I'm sure he's great, but let's get dewy-eyed after you tell us. Oh, right. Yes. Well, the engine I've gotten for us is an ex-Great Western King class. His name is King Edward V, and he'll be arriving this afternoon with any luck. King Edward V. 6016. That's Ed. Wait, how do you know that? I don't know. Okay. I'm just glad we finally have a proper large Western loco. I trust you'll give him a warm welcome when he does arrive. I'll need someone to show him the route when he arrives. I'll do it, sir. Okay, Stan, that's settled. In fact, how about you show him the route on the midday fast freight and then let him take the evening flyer? We can really see what he's made of then, can't we? Yes, sir. Excellent. Right, if you'll excuse me, I have a hell of a lot of paperwork to complete. Lord Stovell walked off in the direction of his house, whilst the engines dispersed on their various jobs. Stan was still trying to work out how he knew the preferred name of a complete stranger. Stuart collected workmen from Stowborough before heading down the extension. It was almost complete. Only a few infrastructure elements were needed to complete the line, and this was progressing on time. He pulled into Fort Stowmouth Station where Arthur was dozing. "Arthur, wake up!" "Huh? What? Where's the fire?" "Oh, it's you. Hello, Stuart. What can I do you for?" "Are you alright?" "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just a senile old timer with bad dreams. What's going on up in Stowborough then?" "Nothing much. We just had a meeting with Lord Stovell." "Not another one. How many times do we have to sit through another summary of the Headborough Weasels? I like nature documentaries as much as the next engine, but Lord Stovell can make them sound like he's reading the company's finances." "Oh, it wasn't one of those meetings, thank goodness." "Huh. Well, what was it about then?" "He's finally got another express passenger engine that isn't a supremacist." do tell. It's an ex-Great Western king called Edward. Oh, that'll be good for us, actually. They're rather powerful, aren't they? I remember my days on the Somerset and Dorset. We used to cross over the GWR line climbing out of Bath, and sometimes I used to cross paths with the kings as they headed west to Bristol. Their exhaust was louder than mine, and I was on a considerably steeper gradient than them. Probably the right choice when you look at what we're going to have to deal with on this extension. The gradients here are almost like those back on the Devon banks. I can't wait to see him tackle the incline out of here to the summit, a proper western bark in the valley. I've always been reminded of my dear S&D since I first ran along this line, although it's a lot more impressive here, I'll give it that. That's true. The two engines conversation was cut short when Arthur had to leave to collect more cement and bricks, and Stuart had to take the night shift workers back to Stowborough. Later that afternoon, Stan was resting between jobs in the head shunt at Retford Junction, when Vaughan and Earl passed the sheds and joined the main line with a heavy goods train filled with rock from the Stowmouth extension. The struggling could be heard well into the distance. 5 minutes later, a high-pitched whistle sounded down the line, and into view came a King class, numbered 6016, carrying a striking blue livery. He backed into the head shunt alongside Stan. "I say, hello there." "Afternoon, King Edward V?" "Yes, that's me. Ed to my friends and colleagues." "Nice to meet you. I'm Stanier. Stan for short." "Likewise. Guessing you're a Stovell Valley engine." "How could you guess?" "Well, the fact you're in deepest western territory gives it away somewhat." "Well, Lord Stovell apparently asked for a Black 5, back when the railway was starting up its revenue operation, so here I am." "Lord Stovell's your manager, then?" "Yeah, that's right. Manager, chief mechanical engineer, and general shouty man." "Oh, we do like a good shouty man here in the west." "I've been here once before, very briefly I must add, so my route knowledge is slightly off." "Oh, that's okay. We're taking the next fast freight to Stowborough, so you can learn the route again." "That'll be good. Last time I was here, I ended up taking your manager down the extension to that seaside town. That's a stunning bit of railway." "It is rather, isn't it? Apparently it's almost finished, which can only mean more work and longer days." "Oh, but it could be a lot worse, couldn't it?" "Couldn't it? Well, not unless you're drafted onto Stowborough shunting duties. If you ever get rostered on that, take a pack of cards and a good few stiff drinks." Ed laughed. "Is that your only excuse for having a few stiff drinks?" "Of course not." The two engines then got into a heated discussion about the various types of stiff drinks they were partial to, and before long the whistle of an engine could be heard from the station, meaning they were needed to relieve the mainline engine and shunt down onto the wagons. I know it's usually a policy of weakest first, but as you're route learning, I'll let you in front. Ah, cheers, thanks. They backed down onto the wagons and were coupled up. They waited for the signal to drop before they started away, with no problems hauling the heavy train up the steep gradient towards Three Lakes and Forley Junction. As they raced through the countryside, Stan pointed out the gradient changes and various signal aspects and speed limits. They approached Wantage, where Stuart was waiting with a stopping passenger service. "You didn't tell me you guys had a city in your fleet. I thought Truro was the only survivor." "Ah, yes. Stuart is our night mail engine most of the time. He's a great asset for Lord Stovell." "Not to be rude or anything, but you guys are in serious need of some more modern locos to help bolster the fleet." "Well, we do have a Light Pacific with us. He's usually the express loco, but after a period of decreasing reliability, Lord Stovell decided to have him rebuilt. Something about, proper reliability and stuff. You're here primarily to take over his work, which frees me up to go back to my old job." "Your old job being?" "Oh, the usual mixed traffic flows, semi-fast passenger runs, and the majority of the fast freight." Very respectable work. Must be the one keeping the entire railway together." "Well, you could say that." They were soon arriving in Stowborough Yard, where they uncoupled and allowed Jack to shunt the wagons around. Ed and Stan went to the sheds where Dan, Earl and Vaughan were stood between duties. Aha, is this our newcomer, Stan? Yes, Dan. Everyone, this is King Edward V, Ed for short. He's Braunton's temporary replacement. Afternoon all. Excellent to see you. I think we may have spent a night at Oxford Shed together one time. Ah yes, I remember. Great to see you again, chap. The Western engines were soon talking about old times on the Great Western. Stan listened on, happy to hear mention of his designer and namesake. Oh, Mr. Stanier was a favourite of mine. He was always fussing over us at Swindon. He even drove me once. Kinda wish he stayed with us, but then, again, if he hadn't, you Black Fives, the Jubilees, Princesses, Duchesses, and the Royal Scot rebuilds wouldn't have happened. And you guys are my favourite non-GWR designs. Glad to hear it. We're quite proud of our Western cousins, really, and the heritage we carry forward. Soon, Lord Stovell appeared. Good afternoon, engines, especially to you, King Edward V. Hello, sir. You can call me Ed if you find it easier. I'm glad you said that. King Edward V is a long name when you're in a hurry. I do understand, sir. Excellent. Now, I hope working that fast freight refreshed your memory of the line. Yes, sir, I feel I'm quite sure I know my route now. Excellent. That decides that. You'll be taking the Stovell flyer for me this evening. If that goes well, I will reveal some more news later on. What kind of news? But Lord Stovell had already turned his back and walked away. Ed looked rather nervous, and Stan could see that. The flyer is easy. If I can do it, you can sure as hell do it with ease. Oh, it's not that I'm worried about. I'm more interested in this further news he's got for later on. Oh, I'm sure it's nothing, unless he's got another thrilling review of the latest episode of Over the Pills to share with us. These television shows are getting rather weird. Although, I wonder how Ian the prescription drug addict is doing this week. I've heard my driver talking about that. My fireman is more hooked on the Hedborough weasels, though. Oh, don't even start with the Hedborough friggin' weasels. Ed, do you want me to show you where to collect your coaches from? I've got to leave not long after you with a stopping service for the Heath, so I can collect my coaches with you. Sure thing, that would be grand. The two engines left the shed complex and headed back to the yard. The train that Ed and Stan had brought in earlier in the day had been dispersed, and now visible was a long rake of coaches which Dan had explained was the consist for the Stovell flyer. Dan shunted onto his two coaches in the yard, whilst Ed dragged his coaches into Stowborough Station and ran round to turn himself on the turntable, before heading back once more to get himself to the head of the train. He was simmering nicely, waiting for his departure time, when he noticed a large group of men in suits cross the footbridge and arrive on the platform. He overheard their conversation as they gazed in awe, apparently at him. I must say, Montague, we are certainly very lucky indeed to get a fine locomotive to replace Braunton. I don't usually like to blow my own trumpet at all, Mr. Turpin, but I'm quite proud that I managed to secure only the best of the Western region's fleet for the job. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting. Shall we climb aboard? You and the rest of the board make yourself comfortable. I'll be with you presently. The large group of men climbed aboard Ed's train and Lord Stovell walked down to talk to him. Ed, as you may or may not have heard, myself and the board of directors are travelling for a full round trip this evening to see how you perform. Show us what a king can do, eh? Oh, I plan to, sir. Glad to hear it. With that, Lord Stovell went to join the rest of the board on the train, and a couple of minutes later Edward set off into the evening. His exhaust beat echoed around the enclosed area as he accelerated out of Stowborough. He shocked Dan as he shook the ground around him with the sound erupting from his chimney. He was quickly up to speed and was soon passing through Grove. He blasted through, leaving a trail of smoke behind him in the canopy. He accelerated harder on the flat section between Wantage and Castle Stovell, ready to attack the steep gradient towards Fawley Junction. The sound of his 4-cylinder bark echoed around the valley as he lifted the heavy train higher towards the summit. He remembered it would be all downhill from Fawley and he could have a breather. He was reminded of the Devon banks as he crested the gradient and entered the tunnel. He shot through the station before easing off on the long descent to Westwards Junction. The cool evening wind rushed against his smokebox and he sighed. All his thoughts that he'd be stuck to slow speed limits whilst here on the SVR had been whisked away. He arrived into Retford Junction just as a mainline service called into the platform opposite, heading for Exeter. Once everyone was off, he dragged the coaches into the head shunt, ran round and headed to the shed to turn on the turntable. He returned and dragged the coaches back into the station, ready for the return trip. Lord Stovell once again came to see him. "You're doing really well, Ed. You arrived here 4 minutes earlier than Braunton's best time. Match that performance on the way back and you'll have a very happy board of directors behind you." "I will try my best, sir. I have to admit I've been so pleasantly surprised by this line. It's a beautiful hidden gem. You must be very proud." "I'm exceedingly proud, not just of the line but of the engines that run it. I have a top team and you've only made it better. Now, I best get back on board. A prompt departure is required. Give Retford's shedmaster a show." Lord Stovell turned on his heel and walked back to the train, where he joined the rest of the board of directors. Ed's firemen had built his fire right up to the firebox door, a typical Western region trait. They were ready. The guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag, and the Stovell flyer erupted out of Retford. Smoke, steam and smuts filled the air as Ed started on the 1 in 100 gradient. His driver opened the sanders and Edward responded. The train quickly gathered pace. He was determined to show the board exactly what a king could do. He crested the gradient at Fawley Junction where Dan was waiting to form a shuttle back to Revborough Heath. He could only look on in admiration as the king raised the rafters with his deafening 4-cylinder beats. Ed continued to turn heads at every station he stormed through. His crescendo of noise was only stopped when he was on the approach to Stowborough. He braked gently and finally rolled into the platform, triumphantly and thoroughly exhilarated by the entire event. The board of directors crowded round, congratulating his driver and fireman on a breathtaking run. They had a group photo by his smokebox and shortly dispersed into the local pub for a celebratory drink. Lord Stovell hung back. "Ed, there are no words that can describe that journey. I must admit I shed a tear or two as we climbed towards Fawley. It was that section of the run that cemented in my mind the decision to request a king was fully justified. I'm proud to have been chosen, sir. I do hope I make a good first impression to the board. Let's just say we'll be doing all in our power to make you stay on even when Braunton does come back into service. Now, I'm going to be riding your footplate back to the sheds so I can make this special announcement." Lord Stovell jumped up and was shocked when the driver stood away from the controls. "He's all yours, sir. My little treat." Montague Stovell almost fell over with excitement. Once he'd regained his composure, he released the brakes and cracked open the regulator. Ed arrived into the sheds where Lord Stovell jumped down from his footplate and stood on his buffer beam. "Good evening, engines. I trust you've had a good day's work. I can certainly say I did. I don't think our days are going to compare to Ed's here. News travels fast and we've already heard about the explosive departure from Retford earlier. I just wish I'd been there to see it with my own eyes. Well, yes, I do believe that may have been the highlight of the day, but we are going to end on an even higher note. La! Not like that, Stania. I do apologise. Sorry. You've been probably wondering what this announcement is going to be. Now you can wonder no longer. I can reveal that thanks to Arthur's sterling work, the Fort Stomouth extension is now running early, and now we can plan ahead. With the completion of the extension coming so soon, we can extend the Stovell Flyer to Fort Stomouth. We have been approached by British Railways, who are now going to provide the coaching stock for what will be known as the Stomouth Coast Express. These coaches are being completed as we speak, and are the first of a new generation in coaching stock that will bring all the modern comforts of train travel to the Stovell Valley. We are proud and honoured to bring such a prestigious service to the Stovell Valley Railway. Ed here will of course be the engine allocated to this service, especially after today's events. Braunton will be the second engine allocated to this role after he is completed. There was a murmuring of agreement and congratulatory exclamations from the engines. I'm glad you agree, but I haven't finished with the announcements. Firstly, the opening of the line through to Stomouth has opened up the commercial docks, as well as Her Majesty's Naval Base, Stomouth, which means lots of lucrative naval contracts and the chance of fish and parcel services. All of you will be allocated to these services, excluding you, Jack. Excellent, naval contracts are my favourite during wartime. Well, you'll be the first to be allocated as and when they come up. Thank you very much, sir. That's all for now. I will leave you alone. I'm sure you want to swamp Ed here with questions and mull over what I have told you. I'm off to the Winchester Arms for a nice cold pint. Lord Stovell climbed down from Ed's buffer beam and walked away towards the town, a definite spring in his step. First day on the railway's gone quite well for you, hasn't it? You could say that. Although, I wouldn't mind taking an express parcel service once in a while. You keep your grubby mitts off my postal services. Hey, don't worry. I still remember the time I had to follow you all the way from Exeter to Retford all those years ago. Why the signaller gave your postal service priority over my sleeper service, I will never know. That was you. I'll have you know that I was a guaranteed connection at Forley Junction to meet Dan's service to Revborough. I did run early though. Well, with the king bearing down on you, I can imagine you did. The other engines laughed, and Ed started to tell the tale of that fateful night, Stan chipping in, adding his post-train experience to the story. Shortly, Dan returned from Revborough, and one by one they drifted off to sleep, until it was just Ed and Stan left awake. I'm glad you enjoyed your first day with us. We're a weird bunch, but we're close, and we've always got each other's back. You're a great bunch, and your manager is top-notch as well. Couldn't ask for a better team. And friends? Yeah, those two. Stan chuckled. Ed bade him good night before quickly dropping off to sleep. Stan stayed awake a long time after, wondering why he felt like he knew this engine. How had he known what Ed had preferred to be called? Was it just a lucky guess? No, he'd been sure. He'd known.